Hey everybody, Libertarian Tex-Mex here. Want to shoot you a quick message, let you know that we're still here, still alive, still pretty much quarantined for the most part. Going out every once in a while to do some priority things like get some food, things like that. But for the most part, we are doing a lot of delivery, trying to minimize our movements, trying to put a little bit more focus on the day-to-day. Meaning, I think me and my wife are very lucky that we're able to work right now, work from home, and be able to, help with the coronavirus pandemic. A lot of stuff going on recently with the state and federal, their rules and regulations in which they're bringing in. I think very, very expected to be. To be perfectly honest, we know there's always going to be a government response. And I think also there's also the medical response, right? What's going on? What are the numbers? What's the fact? What's the science behind it? And I think when I think about our social media post commentary, things like that, you definitely see that conversations don't really start with the science of things, right? Um, what's the spread like? How many people are getting affected? What are the doctors saying, right? What are their suggestions? And then how do we interpret that? I think that is a thing that is missed right now. Not just you know progressives or conservatives, even some libertarians, right? We I think we are kind of in a unique cultural situation where politics and social media commentary drives the discussion versus medical experts, right? Or the experts in certain whatever fields we're talking about. And I think even as libertarians, this is a mistake, right? I think this is definitely not a direction we want to go, even though I think everybody's going there. I think I've always believed that data science and logic should drive your decisions, right? Um, Data driven. That's always been something that I've believed in, right? Collect the data, make sure it's good. What does it tell you? And then what do you decide from that? Um, that's a very different conversation. And I think sometimes even us as libertarians um, can even forget about that. We are looking straight at the political ramifications, the government, social media response, etc., versus just I say eliminating that, but first look at what it's telling you. And then once we've agreed to what it's telling us, what the reality is, then we look at what does this mean, politically, right? What does this mean from an action standpoint, whether it's personal or public? And I think for all different reasons, some valid, some just stupid, right? Um, some people are very quick to move into a direction, and I think it's and including libertarians, right? That will jump into one political argument without even thinking about the details. And I think this is not the right direction we want to go in, right? I think we want to remain firm in our reasoning, firm in our logic, to make sure that we are not jumping to conclusions, but also allowing the experts, right? People in the fields of these conversations to drive it. And then once we understand what that means, then we look at our politics and go, how do we want to move this in the way that we believe our politics should be? So I think, when it comes to the coronavirus, when it comes to lockdown, social distancing, face masks, you look at a lot of this from a medical only perspective, and you see one very strong story that this is a highly infectious disease, that the death rate, mortality rate is not astronomically high, but it's very dangerous for certain people, for certain groups, very specifically the elderly and people with pre-existing conditions like obesity, um, you know, heart issues, if you were exposed to or have cancer, high blood pressure, cholesterol, all those things that are related to health, those are major factors. And when you think about the population that we live in, a lot of the population fits that bucket, you know. So I think whether it's a government mandate or an individual action, I think for sure everybody, please be safe out there. And know that every circumstance is not the same, right? I think, for example, me, I live in the metropolitan area of Houston, highly populated, highly clustered. And these are areas that are, taking the brunt of the infection spread. Even just looking at infectious heat maps for Houston, I'm seeing my area, my neighborhood alone, is a little bit higher than some other neighborhoods nearby. So, regardless of what the social media posts are, regardless of what politics are, take a look at your local reports, take a look at the medical reports, understand how this impacts you and how this relates to you, and take the actions you need to take care of yourself, or specifically, take care of your circle, right? Your network of people, your family, your friends, because maybe you won't get sick, but somebody else could, right? Especially as we open up. Here in Texas, we're opening up kind of once, every 7 days, we're opening up things more, and we're giving it a try, seeing what happens. And so far, the rates haven't gone down. The rates are staying firm, a plateau so far, but we also see delays, right? 7 to 14 days before um, people test positive. So we may not even see any ramifications until June, maybe July. So let's not discredit that information, the medical reports about infection rates, about the mortality rate. We're about to hit, I think we're at 96,000. 96,000 people died because of coronavirus. That's not flu, right? The flu right now, I just looking at the report, ranging between 24 and 60,000. That's not the same, right? So I think there's a false reality that people are putting out there on social media sometimes, and a lot of it is really about people who are really not affected, right? A lot of times it's people in I'm sorry, not urban, people in rural and suburb areas where, you don't have a high population. Most people are spread out. Most people are well to do compared to some poverty rates in the cities. Um, so you have a profile of people who have no idea what it's like, you know, and maybe they won't, or maybe they will, the infectious spread is kind of obviously really based in the urban areas and the major metropolitan areas, and it's slowly spreading to the suburban and rural areas. So they're going to have a problem, you know. Just thinking practically, logistically, they're going to have a problem, right? It's coming to them slowly, but it's coming to them. And I think what I've realized about many things, whether it's prejudice or economy or unemployment or anything like that, is people don't relate to it until it happens to them, and then they realize, yeah, you're right. So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing with people who aren't taking coronavirus seriously are people who are really not affected by it, They just don't know what it's like. Um, and at the same time, on the other side, right, the other side of opening the economy for employment, most of the people who are um, telling us to keep the economy closed are people who have jobs that can work from home. So I think we have to have a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding about someone else's condition, and understand how that relates to us. So this is not even politics. This is just personal development, right? You know, understanding that my me being able to work from home um, is going to be a very different stress scenario than somebody who just lost their job. Or on the other side, somebody who thinks the coronavirus is not serious, that it won't affect them. And then you have a family member, a friend who goes through coronavirus and deals with the brutal recovery of coronavirus. Or worse, somebody dies. And I think once those things happen, that's when we realize that it affects us personally, and a lot of times we want to prevent that, right? We want to say, don't wait until it affects you personally. But we are left with some hard situations, hard questions, right? We need to open the economy for sure. We can't stay closed forever. But at the same time, we need to tackle the coronavirus thing because if we don't, it's going to linger, right? More people are going to die, more people get affected, more people scared to go back out into the economy, right? To go to stores, to open up their businesses. A lot of things hinge on our ability to tackle the issue, whether it's personal or public. I think for me, the question of is it dealt with publicly or privately is not even a question yet, right? Let's just talk about the issues at hand, the logistics, right? The structure of how we have to deal with this thing, because um, I think once you make that a secondary step of these are the issues we're facing, right? You can't open a school because, the classes are clustered for like 30 kids. And we know coronavirus spreads very quickly in groups. So you can't even start a school doing that. A gym, right? A studio, right? You think, me, I'm a big avid fan of martial arts. You'd have serious issues opening up a martial arts school with 30, 40 people, working, sweating, grabbing each other. You're not going to be able to do that. Not now. So how do you modify those things? So I think these are really important questions that we all have to answer and figure out what that means for us, and give people leeway to figure it out. And I think there is where you have the libertarian avenue, right? Where we can shine. Instead of making this an argument about anti-government or minimalist governments or individual rights, we need to reverse engineer our thinking. Instead of going from government to medical or logic, we need logic and medical and then go out into the political. Because I think once we have those answers, then we figure out where our place is, where our policies should go. And as much as I think, there's a lot of focus on government right now, I think specifically the local areas like the county judge, Judge Lena Hidalgo, Mayor Sylvester Turner, Governor Greg Abbott. These people are obviously key players in my area, in the Texas area, in the Texas economy. And there's a little bit of theater, right? We always say it's all theater, right? It's all games. But at the end of the day, we know the details, we know the facts, and what needs to be done. And I think when you go into major metropolitan areas that have clustered groups, a lot of social activity, bars, restaurants, museums, parks that are literally crowded, you're looking at giant risks that you have to manage and mitigate. And I look at that as an individual, and I look at that as a leader in those government positions and in those community positions. And I think it's not an easy position, right? You look at Judge Lena Hidalgo with her kind of enforcement of social masks and stay-at-home policies, and trying to do her best, trying to do her best to manage an outbreak in a major city, something that a governor will not ever experience, something that maybe many judges won't ever experience. So I think there definitely has to be a tailored way to manage this, and that it definitely lies in the realm of libertarianism versus, conservatives and progressives. Um, Libertarians have that capability to be flexible as needed, right? And I always tell libertarians that it's not a black and white issue, right? Libertarians are very much in the gray zone. We have different types of libertarians, right? We have all the way, anarcho-capitalists who believe, no government should ever exist. We have minimalist, people who believe that a very, very bare bones structure of government should exist. And then on the other side, you have classical liberals who believe government is actually necessary and vital to society, and that we are merely managing its authoritarian nature, and making sure that it adequately fits the needs of the people, and still protecting their rights. And not everybody's going to agree on one way to do things. Not everybody's going to agree on the positions in which government should take, but I think the conversations are good and we should keep them up. Keep talking to your friends, keep talking to your family, social media, engage people. This is a big, for me, this is a big belief that engaging others in their beliefs, engaging others with our beliefs is an important thing, right? A lot of people say, the kind of fatalists are always going to say that, oh, people don't change, people are always going to stay the way they do. But I think from my experience and from me being a vocal libertarian that I am, and having my own beliefs beyond libertarianism, right? Libertarianism is just a small bucket, a small fraction of what I believe. Um, and I think people can change. And they have. There's plenty of people who have messaged me, friends and family, who, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, didn't agree with me. And now they're looking at me going, you know what, I kind of see what you're saying now. So it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of education and ultimately about respecting other people's opinions, trying not to ridicule them. Obviously, sometimes Facebook and social media, if anybody's seen any of my posts, um, sometimes people say dumb things and sometimes you got to laugh at it and just, be a snark about it. But can't be snark about everything, right? Sometimes you got to put a little empathy, right? Or even try to find a way to agree with somebody. Maybe you don't agree with them 100%, but maybe there is something that you agree with, and it's okay to admit that, right? It's okay to admit that you agree with somebody, and it's also okay to admit that you were wrong, you know? And I think that's a position that it's hard to take in politics where you can look at the data that we get. Take this coronavirus for example. Looking at the data, it's changing, right? The nature and shape of how we handle this changes weekly because this is something that nobody's ever gone through. Um, it changes constantly, and the data and the information and the science has to be updated, regardless of what our political opinions are. And to say, you know what, the information we had last week, that's not applying anymore. This is the new information. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that because they don't understand the nature of science. Science is always improving and getting better. The information is getting sharper. And whatever we didn't know before, maybe we know a little bit now, but the truth is always something that science is going after, but it's not always perfectly there. And unfortunately, even some scientists can't admit that. But we know that it's always the pursuit and the goal of science to get closer to the truth as possible. Politics, not so much, right? Politics is about control. Politics is about government, telling people what to do. And unfortunately, as libertarians, we don't like that. It's natural, you know. However, I think there's certain avenues which libertarians can concede, or at least understand that, government does have a part to play, and I think that's something that we as either, anarcho-capitalist or minimalist or full-on classical liberals, we have to agree to that, to say, do we all agree that government has some part to play in it, right? And maybe we work our way up from there, We go, yes, government has a part to play, or no, government should be completely void here, and then understand why. But I think from, an emergency management standpoint, I kind of lean towards the classical liberal approach, which is this is one of government's functions, is to manage an emergency.